Hello, everyone. Welcome to Soaring Spirits COVID-19 Widowed Resource Program. My name is Michelle Neff Hernandez, and today we're talking about making decisions on your own. One of the things that's most difficult in my experience of widowhood personally is this idea that all of the things, every decision to make is now yours and yours alone. And even when we have advisors or other people who help us make decisions, oftentimes we would be making decisions in partnership with the person who has died. I think adding to the challenge of decision making, in particular for people who have experienced a COVID-19 death, is the number of decisions you've already had to make. You had to make so many decisions regarding your person being in the hospital. Many of the people who have experienced a COVID death were sick themselves. And so not only were you making decisions for a person that you love very much, whose healthcare you didn't have the hands-on access you typically would expect, but in addition to that, you may have also been struggling with your own symptoms and wondering now if you would have made different decisions had you been in a healthier state. So what I want to talk about today, we're going to talk about 5 ways of looking at decision making. What are 5 tips that we can kind of lean into as we figure out how to make our way through making our own decisions? And the first of them is I want you just to be able to acknowledge the fatigue that comes with having to make all the decisions. So your very first step is to acknowledge the decision fatigue that is so common, not only in widowhood, but for people who've experienced a COVID-19 death. You have been making decisions from the beginning, from the moment that someone said COVID-19 to you. You have been making decisions, one after another, and sometimes supported, sometimes not supported. Sometimes you felt confident about what you were doing. Other times you felt completely like you had no idea if you were making the right choice. Sometimes people would compliment what you've done. Other people may judge you for having made choices that they feel should have been made a different way. So when you consider how many decisions, just think for a minute about how many decisions you've had to make since the first time you heard the phrase COVID-19 applied to your person. And then exponentially add that to after your person dies. Now, every decision regarding how you live your life, what you have for dinner, where you're going to, whether you're leaving the house or not leaving the house, what it needs to be done about any given challenge, whether it's home related or relationship related, all of that ends up falling to you. It's exhausting. I want you just to know that it's normal to be tired of making decisions. It's normal to be thinking to yourself, I'm sick and tired of being the only one to make choices. In my own widowhood, I remember a friend saying, they wanted to take me to dinner. And where do you want to go? And I said, I don't want to make one more choice. I don't care where we go. I don't care what we do. I just don't want to have to choose. And so it's that sense of being responsible for every choice that really adds to the fatigue that's already a part of grief. So if you find yourself being just too exhausted to make a choice, give yourself a little grace around that, recognizing how many choices. Could you imagine if there was a little ticker tape that tick, 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 tick every time you had to make a decision? Imagine the number of decisions that you've had to make all of this time. And I point this out just to really kind of affirm for you that if you're tired, sick and tired of making decisions, that is a normal situation. It's a normal part, not only of grief, but I think particularly for people in our Widowed Resource Program here. So that's the first step. That's easy to do, I think. It's just that it's hard to remember. So I want to say to you, it's easy to acknowledge that you have had to make a whole lot of choices. It can be difficult to remember when you're feeling tired, when you're having to make another choice, maybe when you're doing some self-judgment or self-doubt around a choice you've already made, to say to yourself, I have actually done a lot and it's okay to be tired. So my tip for you is not just to acknowledge the decision fatigue that's a part of this experience, but is also to give yourself a break and recognize that sometimes you may need to just step away from a decision And I realize like sometimes you can't, sometimes you have to make a decision, but whenever you can, take little breaks and give yourself just sort of the acknowledgement, like I'm doing okay, I'm doing the best I can. All right, so that's step number one. Step number two is to simplify. So what I mean by that is whenever you're facing a decision without a person whose feedback and perspective would make you more confident, right, about the decision you make. So in some households, decision making is 50-50. In some households, it's a 75-25 proposition. Maybe in some households, even you made all the decisions and your partner just said, that sounds like a good idea to me. Even though they may not have been actively involved in the gathering of information for making a decision, you have kind of this stamp of approval of someone whose opinion you respect. So when you're simplifying, the idea of simplifying is oftentimes when we don't have that stamp of approval from the one person who typically we would make a decision with, we might open up Pandora's box by saying, okay, I need to ask everyone I know what they think about this challenge I'm facing. So I'm going to use something simple as an example. Let's say you've decided that you need to buy a new chair, and you're looking at the chair and you're thinking, well, I don't know. How do I know what size it is? How do I know what kind I want? How do I know, what material do I like? And so you ask 25 friends for their opinion about the chair. Now, what do you have? 25 opinions about the chair that you're trying to purchase. So when I say simplify, what I mean is try to put a limit on the number of people that you ask for opinions about any given thing in order to simplify the amount of information coming in, right? When we have a decision to make and the options that we've decided to provide for ourselves are 100 pages long, how will you ever have the energy to get through all 100 pages, right? So if we can cut down the amount of information that we provide, and I'm not saying not to do your due diligence, right? I'm not saying that you shouldn't get as much information as makes you feel confident, and that's going to be different for everyone, right? So as an example, when my husband died, 4 months later, the backyard fence fell down. I looked outside of my window and I could see inside the window of my neighbor. This was not a positive experience for me, probably not for them either. So I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I got to get 3 bids, like, right? That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to get 3 bids, and you're supposed to then identify a high bid, a middle bid, a low bid. And, by the time I was done trying to source all of those, I was crying because I just needed a fence. And so at some point, simplifying to the point where you choose between 2, or whatever that comfortable number is for you. So maybe 3 is the right number for you. Maybe 10 is the right number for you, but I can tell you that it's likely 100 is not the right number for you. So being able to simplify by giving yourself a smaller amount of information, yes, what you need to make the decision, but not going over the top. Because what typically happens is when we don't have the person's stamp approve that we usually would have in our partner, we might feel the need to overcompensate for that by letting in more and more and more and more information. So one of the ways of making decision making easier is to simplify your options. The next one is going to be also something you're going to need to personalize. But generally speaking, research tells us, and this is not, for the record, just research, general research, but research we've done with widowed people at the Soaring Spirits Resilience Center, is that making big decisions earlier in the day is your best bet for success. Here's why. Hopefully you've slept well, or at least you've slept as much as you're going to sleep, right? And you're going to wake, you're in the earliest part, whatever your most energetic time of day is. Now, when I said I meant you need to personalize this, that could mean that maybe your best time of day, your clearest thinking time of day is night. If that's true, then that's the time of day you'll want to apply this to. But for most people, earlier in the day is a better time to make decisions because you haven't expended all of your energy yet. You know how you get to the end of the day and you've done all the things? And even if you haven't done anything, let's say you spent the whole day thinking you should be doing something, you've put all that energy out already, right? So making a decision earlier in the day is a way to be able to marshal the available energy that you have and apply it to a specific situation, which is the choice that you have to make. So it's especially true for hard decisions, whether they're emotionally hard or they're complicated. The earlier in the day, the more likely it is that you'll be clear-headed, or as clear-headed as you're going to be. So again, if you're a person who typically, sleeps later in the morning and then makes decisions in the afternoon, that could work too. The gist of it is take your most energetic, clear thinking time of day, whatever that is. And that might be hard to discern sometimes, but typically use whatever is your standard and try to make your decisions at that time. Next is to develop a process for gathering information. So in our Simplify tip, we talked about the idea of having less information, but where do you get your information from? So for some people, they go directly to the internet. So have any of you, anytime you've ever Googled something that you want to find out about, you got the 60 million pages that came after, right? So for some people, that offers them all the options that they need. They feel great about it. For other people, it can be very overwhelming. So the question becomes, where do I get my information? Develop a process for yourself. So you may decide Googling is one of your key ways. You might decide YouTube is one of your key ways. You might have a best friend who is a great researcher. I can tell you, for example, my brother-in-law, if I was ever going to buy any kind of piece of technology, I call my brother-in-law and say, I want to buy this. Could you please tell me what you know about it? Because that man has a whole process for developing anything about technology. So it's a way of utilizing people around you who have expertise in certain areas. Many of you probably have somebody who knows everyone. Like if I wanted to find out who has the best haircut in town, I know I'm going to call that person because they know everybody. So it just becomes, it's a sense of awareness. What I want you to have is an awareness that gathering information sucks energy. So if you can find a way to gather the information most easily in a format that works for you. So let's go back to my brother-in-law example. If I were to say to him, could you please research this computer for me? I'm thinking about buying it. He's not the kind of person that will dump a bunch of information on me. He'll say, here's the top 3. If I were you, I'd pick that one. And these are my reasons why. So that makes it super easy. I wouldn't ask him if he was going to give me 1,000 different options because that's not helpful to me. It might be helpful, however, to you. So it is really more about developing a process by which you get information. And that is going to be very personal, but it's important because once you've determined that, then when you go into making a decision, it removes the element of, how do I even find information about this? Because you've already developed your own process for developing or for gathering information that you need to make a decision. This could include, so we talked maybe it was last week, we talked about building a support network, and we filled out the document that on the back side was all of the different people with expertise in different areas. Guess what? Those can be also the people who help you make decisions. So by reaching out to people who have an expertise in any certain area, when I had to make a decision about the fence, I ended up reaching out to my brother, who's a contractor. So rather than force myself to go through the whole process myself, which I felt in the moment like I needed to own it and make my own decision, I finally got to a point where I was like, what am I doing? I know somebody who knows much more about this than I do. I asked him for his advice. He gave it to me. I got to make my choice. So just know that making your choice is for you, right? At the end of the day, you're going to make the choice, but how you receive information and where you get that information from is a critical part of relieving the burden of decision making. And then lastly, select your criteria. So this is a really important one because especially for people who have been struggling with decision fatigue for a long time, as this group has, selecting your criteria and deciding what is good enough, because the perfect, as you know, is the enemy of the good. And so sometimes we want to make the perfect decision, never make a mistake, do the very best that we can for widowed people, often it's to honor their person, right? To make the choice that they would have made, to make sure that they would approve of what we're doing. here's the truth. The unfortunate truth is that we're not going to know if they approve. And ultimately, we're going to have to forge forward with the understanding that they trusted us and that they believed in us. And so we're going to need to take that trust and belief and turn it towards trust and belief in ourselves. And whatever choice you make, try not to doubt yourself. Like once you've made the choice, decide that good is good enough and that you are going to go with what you've decided, because that's the other piece that takes up so much energy, is when we're backtracking and saying, oh no, did I make the right choice? And I want to also just acknowledge here that for anyone who has had to be the person on the other end of the phone when the hospital's calling you, asking you to make choices or telling you what's going on, and you're wondering if you've done the right thing, I feel like self-doubt is bred in that arena, right? It's bred in not knowing if you had done one thing differently, would the outcome have been different? And the unfortunate reality is that we don't know. All we know is you did the best you could. You did the best you could for your person. You did the best you could for yourself. And that taking that confidence into every decision you make, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm not always going to get it right, but I'm going to decide that good is good enough. And what that frees you from is the need to make decisions 10 times. So I don't know how many of you have been in this place, but sometimes you'll make a decision, right? And you'll decide, yes, A. Tomorrow you wake up in the morning and go, no, B. And then later in the afternoon, okay, no, back to A. A, for sure, A, what was I thinking? I picked A. Then 3 hours later, C, definitely C. And then you go, this is a cycle that can go on and on. But here's what does that take, right? It takes all your energy. Where is your energy for taking care of yourself? Where is your energy for making it through the day? It's wrapped up in changing between A, B, C. God bless you. If you have D, E, F, we'll be going on forever. And so it's the sense that once you've made a choice and you've done everything you can do, right? You have acknowledged that you're tired. You've simplified the choices. You've reached out to people who may have an expertise in this area. You've selected your criteria. For my fence, I need it to at least last 5 years. I want it to be wood and I don't want to have to paint it, right? Those are my choices. Okay, within that framework, here's the 3 I'm going to choose. I choose B. Once I choose B, I go with B. And if A would have been better, maybe, but I'm not going to know. And I've already made a choice and I can save myself the frustration and the extra energy and the added exhaustion by deciding that good is good enough. So these are just the top sort of 5 tips that research has shown us makes a difference as people are having to figure out how to make decisions on their own. The last thing I'll add, and I also want you to know that this document will come to you with your resources after the meeting. So don't worry about thinking about what did she say to me again? We are going to send it out, but I want to make sure also just to identify that starting to think about who are people who help you make choices and identifying your sounding boards, plural, right? Because it's likely that now your sounding board is going to go from a single person to maybe multiple people. And that doesn't mean 20 friends, because if you have 20, it would take too long to check in with 20 people, but 1 or 2 is helpful in being able to process and make decisions and talk through your options. So we will come back to that in conversation later after this video is complete. For now, for all of you who are watching, thank you so much for being here. I hope that these tips are valuable to you. You're always welcome to join us live should you be able. But in the meantime, we're really happy to be able to provide videos to make sure that the content portion of our COVID-19 Widowed Resource Program is available to you, not only for viewing the first time, but maybe even for viewing again if you have the need to revisit any of the topics we've shared over our time together. All right, thank you so much. Be well, take very good care. Bye-bye.